Okay, so now we're gonna start with the first function, the DATEADD. So what is DATEADD? DATEADD can allow us to add or subtract a specific time interval to or from a date. So let's understand how the DATEADD work. So here again we have our date, August 20th, 2025. So now in some scenarios we would like to add years to our dates. So for example, let's say I would like to add 3 years to our date. So we can do that using the DATEADD. So if you do that, in the output you will get 2028 August 20th. Only the date part is changed, and here we have added 3 years. But in other scenarios you would like to go and add months. So for example, let's go and add 2 months to the August. So in the output you will get 2025 10 20. With that we have added 2 months. And of course we can go and add days to our dates. So for example, we're gonna go and add 5 days to our date. So in the output we'll get the same year 2025, the same month August, but only the day will be changed to 25. So we have added 5 days to the original dates. And of course we can go and subtract dates even though that the function called DATEADD. So for example, we can go and subtract 3 years from our dates and we will get, so if you do that you will get 2022 August 20th. Or if you go and subtract 2 months from our dates, so it's gonna stay the same year 2025, but this time instead of August we will go back to June with the same date 20. And the same thing can happen for the days if you go and subtract 5 days, so the same year 2025, the same month August, but only the day is gonna be, instead of 20 it's gonna be 15. So as you can see, with the DATEADD you can manipulate the years, the month and the days by subtracting or adding new intervals. So this is how the DATEADD works. Alright, so now let's check the syntax of the DATEADD, and here things a little bit more complicated. We have to provide 3 informations. The first one is a part. What do you want to add? Do you want to add years or months or days and so on? Then the second one is interval. So it's like how many days, how many years, how many months. And then the last one is the date. This is the date that we're going to be manipulating by adding or subtracting intervals. Let's check the following example. We are saying here DATEADD. So what is the part here is a year. That means we want to manipulate only the year part. Then the interval here is 2, so it is positive. We want to add 2 years. So it's going to go to each order and start adding 2 years for each date value. Now let's check another example. Here we are saying DATEADD month. So here we want to manipulate the month part, but here we are saying -4. That means we want to go and subtract 4 months from each value in the order date. So as you can see, the value of the interval, whether it's positive or negative, we are controlling here the function whether it is subtraction or addition. So let's have a few examples about the DATEADD using our field order dates. So for example, let's go and add 2 years for each date. So we can do it like this, DATEADD. So we are adding years, that's why we're going to go with the part here. And how many years we are adding? We are adding 2 years. So this is our interval, and our field, our value is the order date. So now in the output, as you can see, we got a date, but this date is always 2 years higher than the order date. So everywhere you have C 2027. Now let's go and add maybe 3 months for each date. Just going to go and copy it and say a month. Let's change the interval to 3 and we're gonna call it 3 months later. So now if you check the output over here, we have a new date, but now the difference between it and the order date, we have here always 3 months more than the order dates. So for example, here we have January, but in the new one we have April. And for the next one we have February, and in the new field we have May. So as you can see, we are adding months over here. So as you can see, we are adding months to our original field order dates. Now let's say that I would like to go and subtract 10 days. So let's go and do the same. So we're going to have the DATEADD. Since we are talking about the days, it's going to be the day. We can subtract 10 days, so -10 for the order date. So let's call it 10 days before. Let's go and execute it. Now we got as well a new date, and this date has always 10 days before the order date. So for example, let's take the order number 7. In the order date we have 15, but in the new column we have 5. So we have subtracted 10 days from the original field order dates. So as you can see, it's very simple to add or subtract days, year, months using the DATEADD. Alright, so what is DATEDIFF? Diff stands for difference, and DATEDIFF can allow us to find the differences between two dates. Alright, so let's understand how the DATEDIFF works in SQL. Now imagine we have two dates. We have the order date at 2025, August 20th, and the shipping date is the 1st of February in the next year, 2026. Now we might ask the question, how many years have passed between the order date and the shipping date? So in order to answer this question, we can use the function DATEDIFF, and we can define the part here. If you do it like this, SQL gonna subtract those two dates and it's gonna return 1. So the date difference between those two dates is exactly 1 year. But now if the question is how many months are between the order date and the shipping dates, so here again we can go and use the DATEDIFF between the order date and the shipping date, but we use the part month. If you do it like this, in the output you will get 3 months. And now of course if the question is how many days are between the order date and the shipping date, so here we can use the function DATEDIFF where we specify the day inside it, and in the output you will get 68. So this is how the DATEDIFF works. You go and subtract two different dates and you will get in the output a number. How many years, how many months, how many days. So that's it. Alright, now to the syntax of the DATEDIFF. It accepts here as well 3 parameters. So the first one is the part, as usual, year, month, day. And then here we need 2 dates, not only 1, we need 2. So we need the starting dates and the ending dates. So that means here we have the youngest dates and the end date gonna be the oldest dates. So for example, here we have DATEDIFF and we are saying find the differences in years between the order dates, this is the start date, and the shipping dates. So which dates normally happen? First we have to order something, so we have the order date, and once you order, what can happen next is the shipping date. That's why the shipping date is as an end date. So we want to find the differences between them in years. Or of course, if you want to find the differences between them in days, we have to go and change the part from year to day. So as you can see, the syntax is very simple and very logical, right? Alright, let's have the following simple task, and it says calculate the age of employees. So let's see how we can solve that. So we're gonna go and select first all the informations from employees. So sales and employees. Okay, let's execute it. Now in the employees, we don't have any informations about the age, but we have the birthday. So we can go and transform this birthday to an age. And of course, how we calculate the age, we count how many years between this year and the birthday. So that means we have to go and use 2 functions, the DATEDIFF and the getDay, in order to have the year of the current year. So that means we have to go and use the function DATEDIFF. So let's go and do that. I'm gonna go first selecting only a few informations. So employee ID and birth date. So let's start with the DATEDIFF. So if you are talking about the age, we are calculating how many years. That's why we're going to say as a part, it's going to be the year. So what is the starting date is the birth date of the person. So it's going to be the birth date. And now we need the end date. We don't have here anything about the end date. The end date is going to be the current year. So in order to get the current year, we're going to go with the function getDate. And with that, we are getting the current date information. And this is exactly what we want. So let's close it and let's go and call it an age. So it's very simple. We are counting how many years between the birth dates and the current dates. So let's go and execute it. So now we are getting the ages. As you can see, the first person is 33, the second one is 52, and so on. And now you might getting different values than I'm getting now. And that's maybe you are doing the course now in 2025 or 2026, and the employee is going to be older than now. Now we are 2024, and I'm getting those ages. So this is how we calculate the age using the help of 2 functions, the DATEDIFF and the getDate. Okay, so now we have another task for the DATEDIFF, and it says find the average shipping duration in days for each month. So here we have a lot of informations. Let's do it step by step. Let's first find out the shipping durations in days. So let's go and select few informations from our table. So select order ID. We have the order date, ship date, and I think that's it. So from sales orders. So let's go and execute it. So now we have our 10 orders, we have the order date and the shipping date. Now we have to go and create a new field called shipping duration. So what is shipping duration? It is the number of days between the order dates and the shipping dates. So how many days it took from the order placement until the day of the shipping. So that means we have two dates and we have to go and find the differences between them. We're gonna go with the function DATEDIFF. So now since we are saying in days, we have to go with the part day. So what is the start date? The start date is the order date. And what is the end date? It's gonna be the shipping dates, like this. So I'm gonna call it day to ship, like this. Let's go and execute it. So now by checking the result, for example, for the order 1, it is ordered at the 1st of January and it is shipped on 5th of January. So between those two dates, we have around 4 days. So 4 is the shipping duration. And if you go to the order number 3, the differences between the order date and the shipping date, we have around 15 days. So with that, we have solved this part, shipping duration in days. But now the task says we have to find the average duration for each month. So that means we have to go and select, for example, the month of January and find the average duration. So we have to go and do a simple aggregation. We're going to go to the DATEDIFF at the start and say average, and we're going to close it over here. And let's go and rename it average shipping. And now we have to aggregate by the month. So we don't need the whole order date. We need the month of the order date. So like this, we don't need, of course, the order ID, but now we need to group up the data using this dimension, the month order dates. So that's it. Let's go and execute it. So now in the output, you can see we have 3 months, and for each month, we have the average shipping durations in days. So for the first month, it is around 7 days. For February is as well 7 days. And for March, we have less duration, 5 days. So with that, we have solved the task. As you can see, the DATEDIFF is a very strong function in order to do data analytics using the dates information. All right, so now we have the following task, and it says, find the number of days between each order and the previous order. So there is a lot of stuff going on over here. Let's do it step by step. Let's start by selecting the basic stuff. So select order ID, order date from the table sales orders. Let's go and execute it. So we have our 10 orders and we have the current order dates. So now we have to find the differences between two dates. Order date, the current one, and the previous order dates. So in our data, we have the current order dates, but we don't have the previous order date for each order. And in order to calculate the previous one, do you remember about the window functions? We can go and use the lag in order to access a value from a previous records. So let's go and do that. The order date, I'm just gonna call it current order dates, and let's go and find the previous order dates. So we're gonna go with the lag of the order date because we are interested in the value of the order date. Now over, we have to sort the data, so we're gonna sort it by the order date as well. So this is gonna help us always to access the previous value of the order date. So we're gonna call it previous order dates. Let's go and execute it, and let's check the result. For the first order, we don't have anything previously, so that's why we are getting a null. For the second record, the current order date is the 5th of January, and the previous one is the 1st of January, and this value comes from the previous record, the previous order. Great, amazing. So with that, we have now the two dates, the current date and the previous one. And now we can go very simply finding the number of days between those two dates. And we can do using the amazing function DATEDIFF. So we are interested on the days. That's why it's going to be the day. So what is the starting day? If you check those two dates, you can see that the previous order date is the starting date. So we're going to take the whole thing, the whole window function, and put it over here. So I just moved my picture. So here is the previous order dates, and now the end date, what's gonna be? It's gonna be the current order date, which is our order date like this. So again, we are finding the number of days between the previous dates and the current dates. So that's it. Let's close it. So I'm just gonna call it number of days. So let's go and execute it. Now, of course, we have here null, so we will get as well null in the output. And now you can check over here how many days between those two dates. We have exactly 4 days. And as well for the next one, we have around 5 days, 10 days, and so on. So we have solved the task. We have now the number of days between each order and the previous order. So this type of analysis is very important in the business. We call it time gap analysis, and we have done it using the help of the window function and as well the date function function DATEDIFF. So DATEDIFF function is amazing function to do data analysis. Alright, so with those two functions we have learned how to do mathematical operations on date informations, or we can call it date calculations. Now moving on to the easiest and the last group, we have the date validation, and here we have only one function, the ISDATE. Okay, so what is ISDATE? So the ISDATE is very simple. It's gonna check whether a value is a date. So it's gonna return 1 if the string value is a valid date, or 0 if it is not a valid date. Okay, so let's check quickly the syntax of the ISDATE. It's very simple. The keyword ISDATE is the function name and it accepts only one value. So for example, you can pass a string like this and you can ask SQL, is it a date? So ISDATE and the value. And of course, for this example, you will get true or 1. So as you can see, we are passing here a string value and we are validating whether it is good enough to be a date. Or as well, you can go and specify a number like here 2025. So is this value a date? And of course, SQL gonna accept it and say, yeah, this is a year. So you will get as well a 1. So you can pass as well a number or integer. So you are just checking the values, whether they are suitable enough to be a date. So that's all about the syntax of the ISDATE. Okay, so now let's have a few examples. For example, let's go and select and we're gonna say ISDATE and we will check a value. So let's say this value is a string 123. Let's go and call it date check 1. Let's go and execute it. Now in the output, SQL gonna say, no, it is not a date. And that's why we are getting the value 0, which is correct because 123 is not a date. Let's pick another value. The same thing is date. And now the value gonna be the following. So 2025, August 20. So let's call it date check 2. And let's go and execute it. Now in the output we will get 1. That means the value that we have provided is a date. And that's why we have a 1 in the output, because SQL is saying this is a date. Now let's have another example. We're gonna take the whole thing. So this is a check 3 and remove this from here, but I would like to go and change the format. So let's say that we start with the day, then month, and then the year. Let's go and check. Now in the output you can see it is 0 because SQL does not understand the formats. So we are not following the standard format of the database and SQL, and that's why SQL gonna say, no, this is not a date, this is like a string value. So that means only if the value is following the standard format, SQL can understand this is a date. Now let's go and check another thing. For example, let's say ISDATE and let's have only the year. So 2025, and let's give it the name date check 4. Let's go and execute it. Now in the output we will get 1. So that means SQL considering this value as a date. So that means SQL is smart enough to understand, okay, we have provided a year information and SQL can accept it and say, okay, maybe this is the 1st of January of 2025. Now let's go and do the same thing, but for the month. Let's see whether SQL gonna accept it. So check 5 and we have the month of August. Let's go and check. Now SQL gonna say, no, I don't understand this value. This is 0. So that means this value is provided is not a date. So by checking those results, as you can see, SQL understand only the standard formats, and it allows you as well to check whether a year is a date. So this is how the ISDATE works in SQL. And now you might ask, well, when I'm gonna do this, when I'm gonna check whether the value is a date or not? Let me give you this following scenario. Now imagine that we have the following date. So we have 4 values as a string. And now if you check the data, you can see that we are following the standard formats, but only one value has an issue. So we have here data quality problem. So now what we want to do, we want to go and cast this string value to a date. We don't want this to stay as a string value. We would like to have it in the final result as a date. So what we usually do is that we go and have like subquery on top of those values. So like this. So now what we're gonna do, we're gonna go and say we would like to go and cast the order date as date. We don't want it as a string, and we're gonna call it order date from these values. So let me just make it like this, and let's go and execute it. Now SQL gonna give you an error and say, well, I cannot convert everything to date because you have maybe corrupt data. And this is of course because of this row. So SQL is not able to convert this string to a date. But of course now the example is very simple, we know that. But if you have a huge table, it's going to be really hard to identify those issues. But now still I would like to go and convert those value here. I don't want to get an error. And now if there is like some values like here that is corrupt and so on, this value could be null. So how we can force SQL to convert the data type from string to date and not give us this error. And for this, we can go and use the help of the function ISDATE. Let me show you how I usually do it. So let's go and say, let's check whether the order date is a date. So let's have it like this. And now before we go and execute, I'm gonna make this as a comment, because if I execute it like this, we will get an error. And let's go and get the order date in our select. So let's go and execute it. Now, as you can see in the output, we have our string value, so they are not yet a date, and we have the result of our check. So as you can see, the first row, we are getting a 0. So SQL is saying this value is not a date, but for all other values, we are getting 1. So they are passing the check and they are dates. So now what we're gonna do, we're gonna go and build a logic where we're gonna say, go and cast the value from string to date only if the flag or the check is equal to 1. So that means we can go and use the help of the case when statement. Let me show you how we can do that. So let's do it step by step. We're gonna say case when. Now we need the check, so ISDATE, the order date. So if the output of this check is equal to 1, then you are allowed to do the casting. So let's go and get the cast as a result of this condition, and if it's not equal to 1, then it could stay as a null. So let's have it as a null if it didn't pass the test. So end, and we're gonna call it new order dates. So now let's go and execute it. Now, as you can see, we are not getting error from SQL. So now if you check the output for the invalid dates, we are getting a null. So we are not getting an SQL error. And now only if these string values are valid dates, it's allowed to be casted. So with that, you can go and cast a string value to a date, even though that you have bad data quality. And this is a very important step in order to prepare the data before doing analysis, and it helps us as well to find data quality issues. So for example, we can go over here and say, you know what, let's go and search for all issues. So we're gonna go and take the ISDATE. So let's go and get the check, and I'm gonna say, let me see all string values that are invalid, that are failing the test. So let me execute it. And with that, we are getting this record. And now imagine we have a lot of data. So it's really easy to identify those issues by just using the ISDATE. So this is as well an amazing way in order to identify data quality issues. Now, of course, you might say, you know what, I don't want to see here null. Maybe let's get a dummy value. Well, it's very easy. We can go over here and say else. So, and we can go and get, for example, very large value, something like this. That is easy to identify. So now with that, instead of getting nulls inside your data, you can get such a dummy value. So now you understand the use case of the ISDATE and why this function is amazing doing data cleanup. Alright, so with that we have covered 13 different date and time functions in SQL. So we have learned how to extract the date parts using 7 different functions, and we have learned as well when to use which one. So they are amazing in order to do data aggregations and as well filtering. And then we have learned how to change the date format from one to another, and as well how to change the data types. And then we learned how to do mathematical operations on our dates. So how we can add or subtract days, years, months from a date, or the amazing function, the DATEDIFF, where we can go and find the differences in days or years between 2 days. And the last one, we can go and validate whether the values that we have are dates or not. So as we learned, date functions are amazing functions in order to do data analysis and reporting. Alright friends, so with that we have now clear understanding on how to work with date and time in SQL and their use cases. In the next chapter, it's going to be a very important one. We're going to learn how to use subqueries in our complex SQL queries. If you like this video and you want me to create more content like this, I'm gonna really appreciate it if you support the channel by subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting. All those stuff gonna help the channel with the YouTube algorithm, and as well my content gonna reach the others. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next tutorial. Bye.